Welcome, everyone. My name is Megan Strout, and I am the CEO of TAC Advisors. And today I am joined by Ken Babcock and Angela Wu Lee, who I'm going to introduce in just a second. But before we get started, for those of you who have not joined us for a webinar before, I wanted to go over a quick few housekeeping items. The first is we cannot see or hear you. So if you have any questions for us, please go ahead and throw them either in the Q&A or chat feature. I'll make sure that we answer them throughout the webinar or at the end. And then hopefully you can hear and see us. And if for some reason you can't, please let us know so we can troubleshoot. And I want to go ahead and launch a poll just so we can see who's here with us today. So if you can take a few minutes and go ahead and answer those questions, we'd love to understand who's joining us in the room, so that we can hopefully tailor some of our answers to your current working situation. So thank you both so much for joining us. Ken here is the co-founder and CEO of Tango. And for those of you who have not heard about this product yet, it is one of the coolest new tools. As somebody who is like a process geek, I like memorialize everything that I do for my company, and I have in all my previous companies. This is like a godsend because it captures everything step by step by literally the click of a Chrome extension, which is like the easiest thing on the planet. We're going to do a demo a little bit later, so you'll get a chance to see how it works. And then Angela is a former candidate of ours at TAC Advisors. She has been an EA operations manager, and then we recently placed her at Tango as their chief of staff. I believe you started back in May, right? Mm-hmm. And so your experience over the course of the past decade or so working in administration and operations has made that transition into this chief of staff role a really interesting next step in your career. And so we're really excited to have both of you here today, not only to talk about your product that I think the whole world should know about, but also to talk about what that journey was like for both of you. First Ken and your team about deciding what this hire was going to look like for your team. That's really important, sort of instrumental position that's taking your team to the next level. But then also, Angela, I get questions weekly from EAs who are looking to transition to the chief of staff role and what that looks like. So really excited to dive into both of those things with you guys today. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So Ken, why don't you start by telling us a little bit more about Tango, the company, when you guys started, size and stage, and then your previous working experience, because this isn't your first startup, is it? Or tell us a little bit more about what that has looked like.
Yeah, totally. So I'll kind of jump around here, but Tango was sort of born out of myself and my two co-founders, Brian and Dan. We had met while we were at Harvard Business School in the fall of 2019, and we were all there to do something entrepreneurial, whether start a company or join an early stage company. Our prior experiences sort of lent itself to that. Dan had invested in early stage companies. Brian had exclusively founded companies. And I spent most of my career at Uber in the Bay Area. So I was there for about 5 years, 2014 to like 2019. So saw a lot of phases of that company and a lot of stages of growth. And from being there, knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. So everything I did after that was with the goal of becoming a founder. So worked at an incubator called Atomic immediately after Uber as a founder in residence, and then worked with a company called Keep Truckin', now Motive, doing some product strategy work before going to school. And so Dan and Brian and I, when we were thinking about ideas, one thing that we kept coming back to, or at least a theme that kept coming up, which I'm sure resonates with everyone here, is around team performance. How do you make teams more effective? What makes teams more effective? And then within teams, you've got high performers, you've got maybe new hires, you've got people that are trying to grow. Why is it that it's so hard to get the knowledge out of high performers' heads? That people might call that tribal knowledge or institutional knowledge. The more time we spent with that, we realized that documentation is a huge pain point. Most people don't want to do it. It takes too long. You got to find the hours in your day, then it gets stale really quickly. And then you have to do it all over again. And so what we said to ourselves in building Tango was, what if we could make documentation a passive exercise, something that you could do in the flow of work, where like you said, Megan, just click a Chrome extension, go through your process, and then an artifact is automatically created. And so we started that in 2020. Actually left Harvard Business School, so did not graduate, but spent a year in development, growing the team, building the product. Launched last September on Product Hunt. Had really an overwhelming first couple of weeks. I think we got 10,000 users in the first couple of weeks, and the momentum has just continued. So it's been really exciting just to see that growth and trajectory. And actually, you're all catching us on a pretty cool day. Today, we were named one of Fast Company's next big things in tech.
Woo!
Yeah.
Congratulations. That's awesome. I love that.
So so it's been a really fun journey. And in that growth, today we're 30 employees, all remote, all distributed. And so, when we were thinking about bringing on Angela, it was at a very critical inflection point for our team.
Yeah. And really quick, I think it's good. This is a good point to end the poll, because I was looking and it looks like we have quite a smattering of people from companies and positions. We have some executives joining us, some people in HR and talent, and then a good group of people from in similarly sized companies to yours, as well as larger public companies. So this will be, I think, really, really relevant. And yeah, congratulations, that's huge. So you're almost 3 years in, and I think when we initially connected to talk about this search, it was probably like a year ago. I feel like we were all in communication for close to a year before we've decided to finally kick off a search. And so if you can remember all the way back then, because I feel like a year is like a lifetime in startup world. Sure. Do you remember what those initial conversations were like between us, and how you determined, you and your other co-founders, what this hire needed to look like for you?
Yeah, so I can ground it in kind of the context of where we are at. I think one thing that's unique about building a company, at least from the founding perspective, you start off and you're basically like a supercharged individual contributor. You're doing everything and anything that needs to be done. If there's someone who doesn't own it, you're the backstop. You have to just get it done. And then all of a sudden, you start hiring people, you start having momentum. And then that's not as effective anymore. The people are looking at you as a leader for different things other than plugging holes or plugging gaps, right? So that supercharged IC mentality sort of goes away. And then it becomes more about, how can I arm the team with the right strategy, vision, priorities, and just thinking around where we're at today and what we need to be doing in the future. And so that transition, that's really hard. It was hard for us too. And, as the team continued to grow, when we were talking with you, Megan, it was kind of we had these unique factors, totally remote, fully distributed. I think we're 30 employees across 15 states. And so, the problems that we started to focus on, or at least think about, was really around, okay, how can we operate at a high level? How can we maintain company culture and allow that to expand in the right way? And then how can we be effective as a founding team? So there's 3 of us. We all are, overseeing different parts of the org. How is it then when we can come together, our working relationship is as effective as possible? So I think those 3 things are what pushed us to think about hiring a chief of staff. It's really that operational excellence, company culture, and just founding team effectiveness.
Yeah. And so when we kind of talked about those 3 priorities and sort of drafted a job description, ultimately we landed on it being a chief of staff role. And that seemed to sort of resonate with you and the team. And so anything about that specifically, if you remember about what we talked about, or for those founders who are, because I get that question of Should it be like an EA? Should it be like an executive business partner? Should it be a chief of staff? Like what does that look like for me? Do you remember specifically what was like the final decision maker that this was going to be a chief of staff role?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, I mean, this is true of any startup. There's a lot of ambiguity that you have to deal with. And what that means is oftentimes dealing with the ambiguity means that you have a sense of priorities and you have a sense of strategy and principles, but then in terms of execution, it's on you to figure it out. And so I think for us, being kind of in that decision point between EA and chief of staff, it was really around what's going to get us the candidate pool of people that will be able to embrace, not just handle the ambiguity, because I think a lot of people can do that, but really embrace and be energized by that. And
Yeah.
that's where I think the chief of staff role made a lot of sense.
Yeah. So we do the search and in comes Angela. And Angela, like I said, you had been an EA, but you had also done a lot of operations work and were really functioning in your most recent role and a lot of the chief of staff tasks that you were doing. And so I would love to hear from your perspective, what did that hiring process look like? Was there anything that stood out to you about the job description or in meeting with Ken and the other founders and talking about, maybe what the ambiguity of this role was going to look like? I think that would be really helpful for people to hear.
Yeah, for sure. My hiring process. So I first went with Daniela from TAC, who was super helpful. She really took the time to understand my entire work history and skills and like what I wanted next and really listened. And not just listened, but she brought like a wealth of knowledge of the different types of roles that exist out there and the companies that exist out there, all the possibilities, and help me kind of refine what my priorities would be in my next role, like what I want to look for. And so I met with each of the founders separately, first Ken, and then the CTO and the president, and finished with Ken. I spent a lot of time with them. And I think what stood out to me is, well, the first thing I look for is like founders. I think that is like the number one most important thing, because like who the founders are and what they value will completely drive like the entire culture. And what I mean by culture isn't just like events, but like how they hire and who they hire and how they solve problems and how they make hard decisions. So I think the first thing is like really looking at the founders and like trying to understand what their values are. And second, like this product. So that's something I told Daniela was like, I want to work for a company that the product I understand. I want to I feel like I got the value of Tango instantly, and I saw myself as a power user. I wanted to work at a place where I felt like very close to the product. And yeah, the growth trajectory, as Ken said, like I was just really impressed by the success of the company they had early on. So yeah, founders and product, I would sum up.
Love that. I think that's great. And I that's part of the reason why I was so excited to get to work with Tango specifically, not only for the search, but then have you guys as a tech partner, because like you said, like admins can easily be the power user, right? Like so much of what administrative professionals, whether they're EAs or chiefs of staff or really in any type of administrative profession, like that your job is to document processes, right? And make sure that the company is rolling them out. And so this makes it just such an easy tool to use. Well, wonderful. So I'd be curious to know then, so we made a great match, you got hired. What was your onboarding process like? Because I've heard through the grapevine that like Tango has a pretty awesome and unique onboarding process. I'd love to hear from your perspective, because founders certainly have one opinion on what that's like, but from an actual candidate and new employee perspective, what was that like for you?
Yeah, I was definitely prepared to not have, any onboarding at all. I think that's very common in a role where you are the only person in your function. You're the first EA, first chief of staff. No one's done the onboarding before. So I was prepared to have nothing. But luckily at Tango, we still have a very detailed onboarding checklist that everyone goes through and sets like a very good baseline. And I'll share a little bit more about that later. But yeah, I feel like we really emphasize connection and like be able to get to know everybody at the company from day one to week 2 to just like the first month. All of that is like very systematically built in so that you can feel more connected in a fully remote company, which we are.
So then you have this great, onboarding process, ability to connect with your peers, especially in a remote world, which makes it a lot harder to do. And you don't have an office that you see each other in every single day. And so what did, after onboarding week or couple of weeks, like what did the next 90 days look like for you? And was there any surprises along the way? Did it complete, like the job description we initially wrote, did that just get thrown right out the window? Or, like I'm very curious to know, what did that look like, and how did you continue to build connection and trust with not only your co-founders, but the rest of your team during that time?
Yeah. So this part I really like. So from day one, like you get 2 to 3 onboarding buddies. There's an onboarding Slack channel that's like automatically created so that you can ask questions, kind of to mimic like how you would act in office. Sometimes at the end of day one, there's a casual like Zoom happy hour, water cooler type of thing. And then on your second day, you get to meet like everybody at the company because we do a weekly all hands. Say a quick hello. By the second week, we do like a new hire bio. So I got to introduce myself to everybody. There's like in the checklist, there's like a pretty detailed new hire bio that includes like questions like, what's your favorite restaurant and why? And then like one of my favorites is like, where would you go in a zombie apocalypse? That continues to be a topic of conversation. Just like these sorts of questions just to get to know people. And then we also do like a user manual. All these like things take a lot of effort, a lot of time, but it's totally worth it. But a user manual is kind of like a README doc if you've used it before. It's like a brilliant way to, connect with the team and tell people like, here's how to communicate with me. Here's how I prefer to take feedback. And everyone puts a lot of effort into these, which is really great to see. And then monthly we do like, casual team events, whether that's like board games or escape rooms, virtually, trivia night, things like that. Just like very casual ways to connect.
Yeah. And now, has planning of those types of activities now fallen to you since you've come into the role? And if so, who did it before? Was that you, Ken? Were you the planner of the events before Angela joined?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, it was probably a combination of myself and my co-founders. Yeah.
Yeah, because you also now do, I think, is it quarterly offsites as a team too, right? So you do get to all meet with each other, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. I mean, once the once there was like a world where like people could get vaccinated and tests were readily available, we started doing offsites. Our first one was August of 2021, and now we've done it kind of on like a 3 to 4 month cadence. Because it is hard to completely replace that in-person aspect. I mean, you need some of that.
Yeah, I agree. And then did you have sort of outlined, Angela and or Ken, like what were the biggest sort of projects or heavy lifts for Angela to do in those first 90 days? And what did that look like?
Yeah, I can start. So part of that onboarding process is also, we call it like 5 bullets that define success, and it comes from the employee. For me to feel successful in this role, here are my goals, or here are my hopes. And so it tends to be a pretty collaborative process between like the manager and the direct report. So in that case, it was me and Angela. And so we talked through, a combination of what we needed as a company out of this role, but also what Angela wanted to achieve. And so, I felt like we landed in a place where we had very clear goals, and very clear, those 5 bullets, right, with defining what success looked like. And so those kind of serve as like the guardrails in a lot of ways for like all the tasks that you could take on, making sure that like, okay, is this addressing those 5 bullets, those 5 goals that I have? Are we making improvements there? And then that serves as a way to check in on those, either monthly or quarterly. So, saying that we had a list of 90-day tasks, we didn't have that. But what we kind of said was, hey, here's what we're hoping to achieve, and let's help like give you the inventory of everything that we've done to date, around that stuff. But we're hoping to make improvements here. So
Yeah.
Again, embracing ambiguity.
Embracing the ambiguity. Amazing. Go ahead, Angela.
I'd also add, I think the second part of this that was really helpful was like sharing those bullet points, or at least like a version of those bullet points with the whole team. I think especially in a sort of ambiguous role where people are like, okay, we have a chief of staff now, like what can I go to you for? And so sharing with the team on Slack, or like on Zoom or something is really important. I had phrased it as more of like a, here's the high level, like here are the two things I'm like focused on: operational excellence and like employee experience, and then giving people some examples of like, please talk to me about like all hand stuff. If you have questions about offsites, if you have questions about this or that, like here's what you should come to me for. Just like clarifying it for everybody is like the follow-up to the bullet points.
Yeah. Well, and I love that too, because again, that even that chief of staff site title in and of itself is very ambiguous. And if there's people who have never worked in a company that has a chief of staff, like they don't really know what the job is, or how you're going to play a part. So I love that you sort of managed up to the rest of the team and said, here's what I'm working on, like let me give you visibility, please come to me with any of those things. So I love that there's that continuous open communication within the organization. So I know that there's going to be a ton of people who are wondering, from you and your perspective, Angela, how much has this role differed from being an executive assistant in the past? And like, how has that transition been for you?
Yeah, I think two parts. So I first want to highlight the similarities. Like, you're still supporting the CEO and their team. It's very much still about the service role, and it's about like up leveling the CEO and thus the entire exec team. It's still very important to take a company-wide perspective, be the eyes and ears, and have a good pulse in the company, because the more context you have, the more successful you'll be and the more insights that you'll bring. And two, oftentimes at smaller companies and startups, it's like the EA role, the chief of staff role, can be like inherently lonely because you're the only person in your role. So you have to kind of go out, get to know every single person, start to form your own like informal teams, and depending on who you are, I think it's a lot of fun actually get to know every single person and understand their strengths and problems that they face. And third, like there's still going to be, if you're at a small company, like some level of administrative work like that, just everybody does that. You have to be willing to like roll up your sleeves. I think what's different about chief of staff is that you inherently have more ownership. And so as like a strategic senior EA, you sometimes have to get involved and lead a project from like start to end. And as a chief of staff, that becomes way more of that expectation. And yeah, I mean, like you still have to juggle many demands at once. That's still the same for chief of staff. I think the difference there is that you tend to have a bigger, more long-term goal associated with juggling all those tasks rather than like just all the things that are happening.
Yeah. And one question did just come in, and so I think it's worth noting. So this person wants to know, do you guys have an EA? And if so, do you partner with that EA to support Ken and the other executives? And or if not, how are you guys like delegating the more core EA tasks like counter travel expenses, etc.?
Yeah, so we don't have an EA. So a lot of that, so a lot of that like calendar management, inbox management, that's still owned by each of us as a founding team. Obviously they'll probably get to a point where that's too cumbersome, but I think in terms of priorities, like where we really needed help was in those goal areas that we set with Angela, really just like ensuring that employee experience was really solid and ensuring that we were operating at a really high level as a team. So yeah, it doesn't exist yet, but potentially down the road.
Yeah. And as far as like some of those tasks like travel for offsites and like those types of things, are those things that you help with, Angela, or is the team pretty self-sufficient?
Well, this is where we have technology. I think, yeah, this is exactly where like Tango comes in, and probably why we've like saved so much time being able to do that is just like helping people know how to book a flight or like how to add their email signature. I think earlier we were talking about biggest initiatives, and one of the things I took on when I first joined was employee onboarding and offboarding. So there's a million tangos involved in that, like how to onboard yourself in security and compliance, how to subscribe to the team calendar, how to, add a custom emoji to Slack. These are real examples. I think the reason why we don't need too much administrative help at this point is because everyone's so self-service because of tools that we use because of Tango.
No, I love that. That's perfect. I'm curious to know, Ken, now that Angela has joined, and maybe you can speak not only for you, but on behalf of your co-founders, like how much better is your life now as a business and a personal human being having this support?
Yeah, I mean, geez, I could speak on behalf of my co-founders. I could probably speak on behalf of my wife too. But no, I mean, I think, and this is what we were hoping with the chief of staff role, is like adding an additional thought partner to the executive team. And that's absolutely happened. So yes, life is better. Absolutely. But I think also too, like founding can become really insular, where it's the three of us. It's always been the three of us. We have the context. We've known each other for the longest. We've been there through every phase of the company. And I think bringing Angela into that picture has also helped us, sort of gut check different decisions that we're making, as well as provide an additional perspective. So life is better in terms of, obviously delegating tasks and having, Angela's skill set, on those tasks, but also too, just like in how we make decisions and think about, the next steps for Tango. So yeah, life is better.
Yay, oh good. I love it. Yeah. Well, so I think at this point, I'd love for you, I think, Angela, you prepared sort of a step-by-step of what Tango looks like, and it's just so easy. Do you mind sharing with us like what it is to use your product in a few minutes?
Yeah, for sure. I think we have, a handful of like HR people on board. So I think this would be really relevant to some people, not all. Let me share my screen. So we use Rippling for basically everything. And this is where we ask people to, for example, submit PTO. And I'm about to create a real Tango and create a real time off that I will then cancel. But okay. So this is Tango. It's a Chrome extension. I start capturing workflow with this button. And right now I'm creating this trying to create a how-to to show people how to submit their PTO on Rippling. So press this button. This is a vacation. Maybe this is like in, I don't know, January or something. Save. And it's capturing everything that I'm doing right now. Okay, so that is it. I've requested time off. I can complete this workflow. Confetti, I love the confetti. How to request PTO. And so you can see here that it's captured everything that I've flicked through. So it's go to Rippling, click on request time off. Very smart. I don't have to do anything else here. If I wanted to, maybe there's like, for some reason, sensitive data, I can like always edit this and blur. So maybe I don't want people to see some parts of the screen. And that is it. I've saved the workflow and then I can send this out to everybody else. So now everyone can see, like, I can send this on Slack and be like, hey, everyone, here's a new, now we're using Rippling to request time off. Here's how to do it. This ensures that everybody's doing like the same exact thing. Mm-hmm. And then I would go and add this like our really big onboarding checklist. So here is an example like onboarding checklist that we have. I've created one for our new hire, George Michael. And you can see here how to like submit your PTO. This is a to-do for them. So when it's like my first day at Tango right now, or like George Michael's, and they can see like, okay, this is how I request time off in PTO in Rippling. And it's like the same things that I just did for you back there. So did that make sense?
So cool. It totally does. No, I love it. And I just love that it's a step-by-step video. It's so great for internal employees. And then I think we were also talking about even for clients and for companies externally, it's helpful for like customer success, right? And so
Mhm.
there's just so many different ways that you can use your tool, and it literally is no extra work for anyone, like it at all, which is the most beautiful thing because I'm a huge proponent of working smarter, not harder. So
Yeah, that probably took even like 10 seconds longer than it needed because I was talking over it, but
yeah,
it was super fast.
so cool. Awesome. Well, great. And so anything else that you think that, we didn't touch on today that people should know about for your product? Any upcoming like exciting launches, or I mean, apparently you made Fast Company's like best new tech company, which is awesome. So we're really proud of you before we wrap up for the day.
No, I think we covered a lot of ground. I mean, I think maybe the note that I'll end on, I know there's a lot of people in here who are thinking about their career path, um, thinking about, when it's the right time to hire certain folks. There's a phenomenal article that I reference a ton around scaling companies, which is, I can actually send that to you, Megan, and you can send it out
Yeah,
to the group. But
that'd be great.
the theme is basically like letting go of your Legos. This idea that you're going to do a lot of things in your role, but delegating those and allowing someone else to kind of take that over so you can find a new pile of Legos to go build. I think that's really powerful for scaling companies. And I think, obviously with these types of roles, and you're thinking about, but I'm doing all these things, I want to keep doing them, bringing in a fresh perspective, bringing in someone who can take them to the next level and allow you to focus your energy on that new pile of Legos, I think could be really powerful. So Megan, I'll send that to you, and then maybe you can send this to the group.
Yeah, I'll send it out in our post webinar email. I think that would be great. What about you, Angela? Anything else you'd like to share? I have one more question that you brought up, which is you say in your onboarding, one of the questions you asked is what would you do as like where would you go to survive a zombie apocalypse? So I'm very curious to know what your answers are. I know
First,
it would be.
I'm so curious. I knew Ken was going to mention Lego thing. I think that is like, yeah, that's something we like discuss a lot, and it's something that is like becoming more and more relevant as we grow. But I think, yeah, Kayleen, I think you listed this excellent resource. Totally agree with that HBR article as well. I think, for me, last words is just like talk to a lot of people. Like if you're figuring out what you want to do next, if it's like EA, chief staff, or something else, generalist operations, there's so many different things out there. I think it's just like talk to as many people as you can, take it slow, and yeah, think about the long term.
Yeah. Yeah. And Kayleen just asked too, are there any other resources that have really helped elevate your role as a chief of staff? It could be tools, articles, apps.
Outside, I think, well, so the Legos article is written by Molly Graham, who has this like excellent like a Substack newsletter that she has, and just a ton of like startup like advice. Another one that we look at a lot is like Lenny's newsletter. I can't say his last name, Ken, maybe but a lot of great startup advice there as well. And the reason why I mentioned startup advice in general is like that will help you determine like what flavor of chief of staff you want to be. The more knowledge you have of like the entire tech industry helps with all of that.
Yeah,
so yeah, just love my newsletters.
Yeah, I love newsletters too. Amazing. Okay, so last question is, where do you go to survive a zombie apocalypse?
So mine was originally like to join a cult, but I think I've changed my answer, and I think I would go on a boat.
That's my answer. I would go on a boat too, because like they don't swim, right? I mean, that's what I've seen at least on The Walking Dead. So it's the easiest way to get away. What about you, Ken?
I mean, I get the boat thing. I'm a big skier, so I'd probably go to Snowbird in Utah and just hope that they can't catch up to me, and hope that like they don't end up on the chairlift.
Yeah.
That would be mine. It's a surprising question, I think, or the answers are often surprising because we have so many people on the team that are just like, I'm joining the zombies.
Yeah, really? They're
They're
like, I'm
like,
not even gonna fight it.
yeah, they're like, I'm in. This sounds too stressful. And you know what? I have respect for that too.
Yeah, that's an interesting answer. Well, great. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. And thank you, Angela and Ken, for sharing your story. This was so much fun. Excited to be able to continue to partner with you and spread the word about your great product. And if anybody else has any other questions, feel free to reach out to Angela or Ken. They're on LinkedIn. We are going to share their information after this webinar with you in an email. So I hope everybody else has a wonderful day. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Megan.
Bye.